Star Wars Young Jedi Knights Trouble on Cloud City Chapter 16. Flanked by a stoic Loe, Baka, and a disturbed but aloof-looking Anja, Tenelka waited for the Lady Luck to cruise back into the docking port in Cloud City. Feeling her stomach muscles taut, she closed her burning eyes and tried to face down the fear inside. The prospect of doing this, of telling Jaina Soul that her brother had been killed, was more frightening than any battle or any other ordeal Tenelka's Jedi training had put her through. The warrior girl's throat was tight. Though she and Loe had almost died in the same assassination attempt, she felt there must have been something more she could have done to keep her friend Jason alive. But she was a Jedi. She had failed him. Another more subtle failure haunted her as well. Tenelka had always believed that the connection between her and Jason was so close, so strong, that she would be able to sense if any harm came to him. She should have felt through the Force the instant he died. But she hadn't. Instead, her emotions had betrayed her, taunted her, with the hope that Jason had survived somehow. She even imagined she heard his voice calling her out in her mind. But she had been delirious at the time, in shock from the loss of blood. The Cloud City medics had been able to heal the wounds on her arm, but not the ones in her soul. Fleeting thoughts tormented her now, daring her to believe that Jason was still alive. Lobaka fidgeted beside her, his dark lips drawing down in a frown. EMTD was silent for once, but dimmed his optical sensors in a gesture of respect. Anja's pale face looked pinched, and she avoided eye contact with the others. Tenelka could sense tendrils of pain and sorrow floating like a tangible mist all around them. It was so difficult to face this truth. Jason was gone. Lando's polished space yacht followed floor guidance lights as it landed on the platform. Tenelka's cool gray eyes filled with tears as she took one step toward to face the ship. Lobaka put a strong, hairy hand on Tenelka's bare shoulder. Anja moved back to stand alone behind them. EMTD hung silent and unmoving on Loe's siren fiber belt. The Lady Luck settled in and landing clamps locked it down. Tenelka steeled herself for the fresh grief her news would bring. But just moments after the space yacht's landing ramp descended, a door on the other side of the docking bay whooshed open. Tenelka turned, unable to believe what she saw with her granite gray eyes. Jason himself entered the bay, looking bedraggled, dirty, but perfectly healthy. He grinned a weary, lopsided grin. "Jason Solo!" Tenelka cried. "Jason, my friend!" She bounded toward him, moving even faster than the Wookiee's long legs would carry him. When Tenelka fairly tackled Jason, throwing her arm around him in a joyous embrace, she was nearly as astounded as the warrior girl. He hugged her back, laughing. "Wow, that was almost worth falling for." Lobaka swept both of them together in a massive Wookiee hug. Jason spat ginger fur from his mouth. Okay, I'm all right, you big walking carpet. At least I was fine until I got this pile up in here. But Jason, but how, Jason? What, my friend? What happened? How are you alive? How did you get back here?" Tenelka asked in a rush. Loe roared in his own barrage of questions. EMTD added a scolding tone. "Master Jason, you gave us all such a fright. It was really terribly inconvenient of you." Thanks, EMTD. I'm glad to see you too," Jason said. "I'll try not to do it again." Lando, Jaina, and Zeke emerged from the Lady Luck and blinking surprise at the other young Jedi. The knights remained clustered around Jason instead of greeting them on their return from Clackdoor 7. "Hey, did I miss something here?" Lando said. EMTD answered for them all, speaking loudly in his tinny voice. "You certainly did, Master Calrissian, and you don't know the half of it." Anja came up to Jason, trembling. He could see the relief in her eyes, which she tried to cover up with a bland, imperturbable smile. "Well, now this is one story I've got to hear," she said. "Don't tell me Jedi Knights can fly now." Jaina and Zeke ran to join their friends as Lando sealed up his space yacht behind them. "Wild trip. We got lots of information." Jaina said, "Found out what's going on here in Cloud City?" We found out a few more things too," Jason said, "and I discovered exactly what happened to Kojan on that balcony." Tenelka couldn't cover her gasp of surprise. Loe growled. Lando's interest was obviously piqued. Looks like we've got some talking to do. Andra seemed uncomfortably disturbed. She crossed her arms over her chest and gave Jason a shaky smile. You're full of surprises, aren't you? Hey, never underestimate a Jedi, he said. As they sat together, sipping hot broth drinks in a quiet cantina that overlooked the Thrantha practice for the coming Sky Rodeo, they shared their separate stories. Lando, Jaina, and Zeke recounted what they had learned from Friggin' Dan about his band and how the Black Sun was trying to infiltrate the workings of Cloud City. Tenel Ka, with additions from Loe, told them of the assassin attack that they had followed the fired Ugnaught construction boss, while Jason described his rescue by McKim and the Thrantha Rider, and how McKim had seen a visored man with algae green hair murder Kohan, an angry, ruthless man who's almost certainly Zethros himself. But you can't prove it's Zethros, Anja said. There's a big galaxy out there, plenty of other people with moss green hair. And the laser visor? Jane asked skeptically. Certainly enough evidence to convict anyone, Jaina said firmly. I prefer solid proof myself, instead of hearsay from an eyewitness who was flying around with the sun setting in his eyes. If McKim was so close that he could make out the facial features of the person who allegedly boosted Kojan over the side of the balcony, how come he wasn't close enough to catch the man as he fell? I already explained that, Jason said. There were storms. Lando raised a hand for peace. It's easy enough to determine whether or not Zethros was here. I still have my old Baron Administrator access codes. Let's find a nice little quiet business area, and we can check out Cloud City's central computer banks. Loie, I think you might be able to help me with that. The young Wookiee chuffed in agreement and nodded his shaggy head. We can check the records. Everyone coming in or out of Cloud City has to leave some sort of passport information, docking records, passenger manifests, tariff documents. It'll be quite a search. Zethros is kind of hard to miss, Zeke said. Loie stood up from the table, his ginger fur bristling, a dark streak prominent on his forehead. EMTD said, If I can be of any help, I would most gladly offer the assistance of my circuits. Thanks, EMTD, Lando said. Let's see what Lobaka can find first. As the other young Jedi Knights gathered around the computer terminals, Loie bounced through the public record database, scanning for the name Zethros. The search ultimately turned up nothing. See, he never came here, Anja said. Your Thrantha Rider made a mistake. I thought you told us we were gullible, Zeke answered. Any man who's got that many connections and is involved in illegal activities would know how to hide his tracks. Next, Loie looked through the docking records, credit receipts, list of purchases made and transmissions sent. It was a monumental task that required all the Wookiees' concentration, as well as the full access given to him by Lando's high-level security codes. I'm sure glad you were Baron Administrator, Jaina said. We could have hit a dead end right away if you hadn't opened some of those passworded files. We may still hit a dead end, Lando said. Just a lot farther along the way. Anja watched, arms crossed over her chest, still skeptical. She had so obviously been relieved, even overjoyed to see that Jason still lived. Now, perhaps out of embarrassment, she hid behind a haughty mask. Loie's golden eyes narrowed in suspicion as he stared at the images that flickered up from the docking bay holograms. He plugged EMTD in to help him monitor the data. Some of the video snapshots stuttered and wavered. EMT suddenly blurted in a thrill-filled voice. Dear me, these images have been tampered with. I am detecting skillful erasures and fine video cuts. Most sophisticated. Lando watched as Loie worked fiercely, his long fingers tapping the controls. He growled something, and EMTD said, Master Lobaka is attempting to move beyond the obvious. If someone has assisted in covering up the arrival of Zethros, they most certainly have sanitized the recordings from the docking bay, but they have overlooked other holograms. Images flowed from in a rapid blur. Jaina peered over Loie's shoulder. Finally, everyone intently studied the screen, and Loie growled in triumph. There, I see it too, Jaina said an instant later. That's him, Jaina agreed. Good old, respectable Zethros. An external hologram from one of the port town gambling casinos had managed to catch the image of the tall man with the moss-green hair and a narrow silver laser visor. The man emerged from a docking port and ducked into the shadows between buildings, trying to lose himself in the crowd. He couldn't clean up everything, Lando said. Loie froze the image and enlarged it. Now, do you have any doubts? Zeke asked Anja. She avoided his gaze as she continued. Any man who intentionally removes all the records of his presence here has got something to hide. Doesn't mean he murdered anybody, Anja said. Jason looked at her in surprise. Maybe not, but he was here exactly the right time, in secret, and trying to erase all evidence of his presence from Cloud City records. We know that a criminal organization has been blackmailing and threatening professionals here in Bespin. A criminal organization that has ties to Mord Mantell, where Zethros lives. And we also have an eyewitness who says he saw Zethros throw Kojan off a balcony. How much more proof do you want? Tenelka nodded grimly. Do you believe Zethros is involved in Black Sun criminal activities? Lando frowned. More than that, I'm afraid, from his background and for what I've seen here, I think Zethros may be one of the key figures behind Black Sun. Worse yet, he added, the fact that those records and images have been doctored tells me they must have some pretty important people in Cloud City's administration under his thumb. Friggin said Kojan had tried to report the danger of the authorities, but they never did anything about it, Zeke pointed out. We've got to report this, Jaina said in a determined voice, but this time to someone who'll take it seriously. If Black Sun's on the prowl again, we've got to do something before they get too powerful to stop. Nobody noticed how Anja jumped when she heard Jaina's words. When the door locked cyber-sealed, Anja retrieved the meager luggage she had brought from the Jedi Academy. She rummaged through the bottom of her case, popped out the false bottom, and removed her high-power small transmitter screen that she used only in emergencies. When the screen wasn't switched on, it looked like a portable mirror, but it was much more. Moving her fingers to the edges of the frame, she depressed buttons, entering a code sending her signal. She tossed her long, honey-streaked hair behind her, feeling her sweat prickle her scalp. Oh, how she needed a dose of the spice right now. She had to have one, but the need wasn't any greater than it had been all day. Anja didn't know how long she could tolerate this pressure. Her personal supply was nearly gone, and she didn't know what she would do unless Zethros came through for her. She hated to depend on him. The secret crime lord followed his own paths, busy studying his own game. In the past, though, he had spent an incredible amount of time with her on Ord Mantell, taking her under his wing, training her in the ways of making a profit at the expense of less vigilant people. Anja had connected with him for the first place because of her shared hatred for Han Solo. Zethros had helped her arrange the fateful meeting between him and the attempted ambushes on Anubis. But Han Solo had survived it all. Then Solo's children had adopted her as a friend. At first she had gone along, pretending. Anja had been most eager to do whatever she could to hurt Han Solo for his despicable crime, for shooting her father, Galandro, in the back, even though Han Solo denied it. Anja knew the truth. Zethros had told her what had really happened. After an interminable silence and the transmission delay, the mirror finally clouded and the face of Zethros appeared. The laser red dot of his optical sensor beamed through the visor that covered his face. His moss-green hair seemed disoriented, discolored by the numerous scrambling and descrambling routines buried within the signal. "Ah, my little Vekler," he said, you must still be in Cloud City. By now I'm sure you've learned of this tragedy has befallen your young Jedi friends." "Tragedy?" Anja said with a frown of distaste. "So you did that setup?" "Of course," Zethros said. He looked at her at his fingertips, then back up, smiling at her. "Well, they're not dead," she said in a flat voice. "None of them." Alarmed, Zethros drew back. "But I've already had a report from my operatives. At least 3 of those meddling kids were thrown out an exhaust tube and dumped out into the open skies of Bespin." "Is that the best you could do?" Anna chided. "I've told you before, they were resourceful and strong." She amused by his obvious surprise. "They've been trained by the Jedi Master Luke Skywalker himself, and they've been through a lot worse than falling down a hole." Zethros snarled. Anja took the new tack, scowling back at him. "How could you send a bunch of hired assassins to kill a few teenagers? Even for you, isn't that a bit, she searched the right word, cowardly?" Zethros raised his eyebrow up his visor, and the red laser eye flashed back and forth in agitation. "Do I detect compassion for the Solos in your voice, Anya Galandro? I must not have trained you well enough. You are a predator, ruthless as the vehiclers on Bespin, and now you're feeling sorry for the children of the man that killed your father?" He laughed out loud. "Do you realize how ridiculous that is?" Anja bit back a reply, not sure exactly how she felt. Jason had been so friendly towards her. Jaina had accepted her, and even their friends considered her part of the group. She never felt this way before. She'd always been bitter about her life, holding on by her fingernails, fighting for every little advantage she managed to get. Never before had Anja felt the slightest bit sentimental. Zethros leaned closer, his face glowing larger in the mirror screen. Have you changed your mind? Do you want Solo's children killed? Perhaps you'd like to send some flowers to Han Solo himself. Anja felt torn. After what Solo had done to her father, she spent her life trying to get even with him. He deserved to be hurt. But when she had believed Han Solo was dead, it had twisted her inside. Jason Solo was dead, it had twisted her insides. The pain had been unbearable. It doesn't matter anyway, Zethro said. Even if you did change your mind, I doubt it could stop my plans now. Everything is set. Soon I'll send my signal, and Black Sun will appear everywhere, simultaneously taking over key installations and assuming key positions. Then the galaxy will run smoothly for us. My operatives are in place. They received orders days ago to eliminate Jaina and Jason Solo and their friends, as well as Lando Calrissian. I can't afford to let anyone find out too much about how we've been working our way through the bureaucratic levels of Cloud City. Bespin will be ours, and as will Kessel, Mon Calamari, Ord Mantell, Borgo Prime, and every other important installation. Even Coruscant will feel our strength. Anja swallowed hard and forced herself to change the subject. I'm almost out of spice, she said. You promised me more. I've done everything you asked. Yes, he said, brushing aside her comment. I'll get to you as soon as I can. When? She asked. Her lips trembled. Her eyes stung. She hated to beg. Zethos looked at her and smiled faintly. It's on my schedule. Don't worry your pretty little head, my little Veckler. Now get back to work. Your work. I have details to attend to. My killers are professionals who always carry out their orders. Just stay clear of Lando Calrissian and the Solo kids, and you'll be safe. Zethros switched off the flat screen from his end, and it became a mirror in Anja's hands. She stared at the polished surface for a long time, seeing only her own reflection. And Anja did not like what she saw there.